Okay, so welcome everybody. Again, appreciate your time here. I know that everybody's busy, especially during this hour, running out to get lunch or running or doing other items as well. I do want to introduce myself. My name is Mark Wildonger. I'm a senior planner with the Office of Planning and Zoning in the Long Range Planning Division and project manager for the Odenton Town Center Master Plan update. With me, I do want to introduce some other team members here from the Office of Planning and Zoning. We have Don Zigler, who is also on the project team for the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, Brent Afune, Jesse Levy, and then from our Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, who will also be helping in the facilitate our breakout groups, Jason Schweer, who is our Vice President, again on the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, and Sandra Deeds, also a member of the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee. Okay, so let me share my screen here and we'll get into the presentation and the meeting here. So this afternoon, we're just gonna do a quick overview of the context and the history of the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, an overview of the 2021 Master Plan update process. We're going to go into them breakout groups and discuss some questions in some of these smaller groups, and we'll have facilitators for those. And then we'll reconvene, share some of the main thoughts, any surprising items that came up during the discussion, and then talk about next steps and where we're going from here. So the first poll question, just to get a sense of where folks are coming from. Do you live in the Odenton Town Center growth management area? And that area is identified here in the yellow outline or dotted outline area. So let me go ahead and launch that poll. We'll let that run for another minute or so to see where folks are coming from. Okay, so I think most of you have answered, and the results are almost 75% are not from the Odenton Town Center growth management area. But this is something that we can dive into then during our breakout groups, as you might have businesses or do business within the Odenton Town Center growth management area. Okay. So, oops. So as far as context for the Odenton Town Center, again, this area that's in yellow is approximately 1,233 acres. And it includes everything from this northern area by Fort Meade, that commercial area just outside the gates, all the way over to the giant shopping center here on Sappington Station Road, or on Odenton Road, but near the by the Sappington Station Circle. And then the industrial area to the north, some residential area also to the north, to the northwest, and then a core area around the train station where we have some mixed use type of development. As one of the town centers within the county, this is designated as one of the growth areas or targeted development areas within the county. And the idea there is to prevent sprawl, or another term that we use is implementing smart growth, where you preserve some of the more rural areas or the green fields where you don't want development, and target the areas where there is infrastructure like water, sewer, roads, and especially in this case, public transportation. So that the municipality, or in this county, Anne Arundel County, isn't needing to spend additional funds to extend water lines or build capacity on roads, again, in those more rural areas. So development is regulated primarily by the Odenton Town Center Master Plan. And what this means is typically throughout the county, developers need to refer to the code, the county code, and identify what zoning district they're in, what they can build, if there are any design standards or guidelines. And that's the main avenue developers look at when they need to identify what they can build and where. With Odenton, we have the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, which is not only a master plan that identifies goals, policies, and strategies, but it also has requirements. And it actually supersedes the code in those cases. So, and I'll talk about more about how we're going to structure this new 2021 Odenton Town Center Master Plan in a little bit. So we also have the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, and their task is to be advocates for the plan, again, implementing and advising on those goals, policies, and strategies. Really, they're the ones that are in the community, have an understanding of, after talking with residents, business owners, other folks within the community, as to what the needs may be within the Odenton Town Center. They also review and comment on development applications. So when a developer wants to submit an application to build within the Odenton Town Center Growth Management Area, they are required to present to the advisory committee first. And in doing so, the committee has an opportunity to provide comments, and those comments are then folded into the Office of Planning and Zoning's official review of those development applications. And like I said, similar to the first one, is advise on keeping the plan up to date. So the last update was in 2016. And over those 5 years, as you can imagine, market trends change, different needs within the community for residents change. So the idea is then over these 5 years, having a committee who is in tune with what's happening in the community is able to provide that feedback to the Office of Planning and Zoning and say, hey, you know, certain permitted uses may have been good 5 years ago, but maybe those permitted uses just don't reflect the vision that we have today within the Odenton Town Center. So they provide that type of input. So as far as some history then, with the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, the vision was first identified about 50 years ago. And I know that seems like a challenge here today, but it has received these updates periodically then over these past 50 years. And it wasn't until then 2003 where the plan actually then adopted new zoning districts that could then actually fine tune and provide some additional guidelines and requirements as to the type of development that we would like to see in those specific areas. And like I mentioned, is the latest update was in 2016, and before that was 2009. So some past successes, we want to talk about the successes and challenges that we've seen over those past 50 years, because we want to make sure that this plan is rooted in reality and really identify what has worked and what doesn't work. And we'll get into that during the breakout sessions. All the participants will have the opportunity to share their thoughts. So over the past 50 years, we've improved the infrastructure. Like I mentioned, this is one of those key components to implementing smart growth, where you want the water and sewer infrastructure so that it helps facilitate the type of development that we want to see in that area as a targeted development area. The county and state have also made road improvements. If you drive along Maryland 175, especially towards that northern area, outside of Fort Meade, they've now expanded the number of lanes in that area and included a hiker-biker trail as well. The county is also ongoing. We're currently working on a grid street study, and those grid streets are really the streets by that core area by the train station. Hale Street, Baldwin, Nevada, Duckins, to name a few. And the idea there is how do we improve those roads for better access and mobility for vehicles, but also making sure that we have the streetscape improvements for pedestrians, making sure that there's a wide enough sidewalk, street trees, street furniture, items like that. So those are the types of items that we're currently working on to make sure that we really create an environment that helps facilitate a town center vibe, if you will. So we've also seen new residential projects, Flats 170 along Maryland 170, the Shirley, which is a brand new project along Town Center Boulevard, and a couple other new residential projects also within the core area. We've established funding programs that, again, help encourage the type of development and almost incentivize development to the areas that we want. So there's a state designated TOD area and a sustainable community designation within the Odenton Town Center. And again, the idea there is it just opens up or incentivizes development within the town center. The tax increment financing district was also established a few years ago. And again, that would allow then funds to be used for any type of capital or public facility to be built within the town center. Current challenges. This is an aerial shot of the Odenton Mark Station, specifically the parking lot area. And for folks that have been following along, there was originally a proposal to do a mixed use type of development, actually what you would see across the street at the Village at Odenton, where you have retail on the bottom floor and then residential above it, mixed in with restaurants, shops, services, items like that. Unfortunately, that fell through a couple of years ago, but that's always been one of these challenges is the ability to convert that surface parking area into more of a structured parking deck so that you free up more land to have that type of mixed use development. What in the planning world, we call that transit oriented development. So again, mixed use development that helps support transit in that area and ridership on those transit lines. Also within the town center, there aren't large property owners. Some of these property owners have 1 acre or less than 1 acre, and the county doesn't dictate when or how a private property owner should develop their land. So oftentimes there are one-off type of projects at 1 acre, or like I said, less than 1 acre, where they may not necessarily sync up with the adjacent property. So you might get one property that includes some type of community amenity, and then a couple of years later, the adjacent property owner builds, and they may not necessarily sync up, or if they're providing an area of forested land on their property, it would be nice if potentially those forested areas could be combined into one larger one. They site them adjacent to each other. One item that hopefully we can move from the current challenges to the success column in the next couple of years is a park. And you can just see one of the corners of that area in this aerial image, where the county in its current draft budget has funding allocated for a public park adjacent to the library. But again, otherwise, there aren't any large parks within the Odenton Town Center growth management area. Public transportation also seems to be one of the challenges, is making sure that we have a bus service that links the train station up with major employers like Fort Meade, and there is current bus service that does that, as well as any other sort of large shopping areas. And there is a Crofton connector that services these sites, but making sure that we have more of a robust public transportation system to really that may run more frequently. And we'll need to study that as we go through this process. And one other item about public transportation that I'd also like to include or mention, bike ped facilities. So making sure that we have adequate sidewalks or safe sidewalks or trails that people can use not only for recreation, but getting to and from their employment within the town center. And ultimately making sure that development matches the community vision. So again, is within our Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee meetings, if you've tuned in recently, there have been some developments that, again, is in the advisory committee's opinion, may not necessarily match what the community is seeking. So how do we make sure that we sync the vision up with the type of development that we're looking for? So going to launch two more polls here, one at a time. And the first one is, how often do you visit shops or services? Because we know that there are draws for shopping and services outside of the town center. So we're curious to see how often people actually do visit the Giant Shopping Center or the Ace Hardware within the town center. Okay. So almost a good even split amongst all these responses. And you can see about a quarter never visit the shops or services, but then again, the remaining 77% here, more than 3 times a week, which is great. It's good to hear. So there is a demand. And the third question, and again, this is a little tricky because during COVID, folks were working from home. Just curious to see how many folks were riding the MARC train pre-COVID. Okay. So this is really interesting. Almost 80% never rode the MARC train here from Odenton. So I think that's something we can also dive into during our breakout groups and talk about why that may be, if there might be some impediments to that, or that's just the way of life. So we can talk about that a little bit more. Okay. So sort of transitioning then here of what's going to help inform this 2021 Odenton Town Center Master Plan update. And the sort of the foundation, or what sets the tone for goals within the county, is the general development plan. And again, for folks that may have been following, that plan, which we've called Plan 2040, is a 20-year plan for the county, is currently in its legislative process, which means that it's currently at county council and it's being reviewed by county council. And they're listening to constituents, they're proposing amendments, and hopefully that'll be adopted shortly. But within the Plan 2040, there are several key goals and policies and strategies that address sort of, again, like I said, setting the tone for the type of development and sort of infrastructure, capital projects that ought to be looked at or examined within the town center. So starting off sort of at the broad level is one of the vision themes within Plan 2040. It identifies support for town centers. So again, Odenton Town Center is one of those. Mixed use and transit-oriented development around the MARC train station. Sustainable design, smart growth we talked about, making sure that we target development to Odenton and not to the rural areas. And making sure that we do this in an open and transparent process, like we're doing today, meeting with the public. So within the built environment chapter, specifically here are a couple transportation-related goals or policy strategies. And they talk about, again, bike ped facilities, managing the roads, and also as well as the trail network within these areas. Looking at the type of development, we want to make sure that again, we're focusing and encouraging this type of high quality development within the town centers or the targeted development areas. We want to make sure that these are high quality developments where people can live, work, and play. So again, making sure that we provide those enough or different types of housing and different types of affordability for that housing, making sure that there are places for employment within the town center. And like I just mentioned before with the park. So making sure that there are recreational outlets for people that live in the town center. And if you could do this without a car, that could be a plus as far as carbon emissions, addressing some of the environmental concerns that we face. So again, some of these other items also address that sort of live, work, play type of mentality that we'd like to see in the town centers. So the other chapters within the Plan 2040, we talk about the natural environment and increasing our urban tree canopy, because we don't want this to just be impervious surface or pavement, that we want to make sure that we create forests and have that tree canopy within this area. And having Fort Meade right next door, one of the state's biggest employer, making sure that we make those types of connections. Again, whether people want to walk or bike to employment, or people are coming from Washington, D.C. or Baltimore and using the Marks station to get off the train and go to work. So a few economic development strategies that generally address the Odenton Town Center as well. So I do want to provide just a brief overview of the process here. We had our kickoff meeting for the Odenton Town Center Master Plan back in January. You can see the "We Are Here" icon, which is March 18th. And we do have, so we have two meetings today, this one here and another one at 7 o'clock. Again, same material, just trying to make it more accessible to more folks. We're also going to launch a survey this afternoon that more or less mirrors the items that we're talking about in our breakout groups. So again, is for folks that aren't able to attend these meetings virtually, there will be an opportunity to take a survey, and that survey will run from today until April 4th. And I'll include links of where you can find that survey. I'll also mention that the survey is online in those links that I'll share shortly. And it's also, if anybody isn't technologically savvy or has a bad internet connection, we have put paper copies of the survey in the Odenton library. And those are in the lobby, which is open to the public. You don't need to make an appointment to visit the lobby. So those are available. And again, that'll run through April 4th. So you'll see two lines here, and I'll talk about that in just a minute here. But as you can see, we're going to be drafting the plan from March until August. Hopefully we'll have a final draft in September, and we'll have a public meeting to review that draft, get your input, share it online, and you can tell us sort of if we're on the right path, what needs to be changed, anything that you may disagree with. And then heading towards legislation, having it reviewed by the Planning Advisory Board in October, and then introducing it to the County Council in January of 2022. Oh, I'll also mention then there will be a follow-up survey in April. So again, today is really just data collection, identifying what some of these issues are, and then we'll do a follow-up survey where we can then drill down a little bit more from the information we get today. So just going over some of the outcomes for this master plan process, it starts with public engagement, making sure that we've heard from the community, the perspectives of different stakeholders throughout this process. And then ultimately with that support from the public or that participation from the public, we're creating a plan that folks can support and respect. And that plan will have a vision, it'll have goals and policies and strategies that sort of set some direction for, again, type of development, capital improvements that need to be occurring within the town center. And then actions on how to actually implement those strategies. And ultimately, we want to track that progress and the effectiveness of those strategies. And sort of planning is sort of a circular thing, right? As you identify these goals, policy, strategies, you implement them, you track them, and then you're right back at the beginning again, where you've learned what's worked, what hasn't worked, and you're drafting a new plan in another 8 to 10 years, or whatever that time frame may be. So overview of the master plan process. These are those two lines that you saw, that blue one and that purple one. So the blue one is that master plan where like I said, currently it does have requirements. And with this update, what we're planning to do is take those requirements out and put those in the county code so that the master plan functions more like it ought to, identifying those broad level goals and policies, strategies as they apply to the Odenton Town Center. And then the county code, again, where those requirements will end up going, and it will be the county code design manual. There are a couple other regulatory documents during the development review where you'll find those specific requirements of what is required of developers. Okay, so I've talked long enough because this meeting is really to hear from you all. We're going to do breakout groups where each one of the members of the project team that I mentioned before will ask a series of questions. And again, they'll ask a question, take your time. We don't want to just jump into it. We've got plenty of time today. Think about a response, and then we'll sort of go around our virtual room and share your ideas with a group. Okay, and there's about 3 questions. And again, feel free to be chatty, talk it up. We're here to just hear from everyone. Okay, and then once we finish up with those questions, we'll reconvene, and the facilitator will share out a summary of what was discussed in those meetings. And again, just to sort of give you a flavor of what other groups have talked about then during the next hour or so. And then after we reconvene and the facilitators share out, we'll talk about next steps and go from there. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I will break everybody out into groups and ask that the facilitators get their fingers ready to start typing. Okay. Just give everybody another few seconds here while everybody comes back into the room. Okay, so I hope everybody had an opportunity to share their thoughts about what's working, not working in Odenton, and then sort of transitioning to identifying, sort of setting a vision. How would you like to see Odenton in 10 years? So I'm going to call on our facilitators, and they'll share some of the key themes that came out of their discussion. So I'm going to start with Don. Do you mind going first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Don Zigler. My team was made up of Eric, Kelly, Stuart, and Michael. What we discussed on what do you like about Odenton, the examples were the centrality of the location, the closeness to Baltimore, DC, and Annapolis. Yeah, for those who do take the mark, that you can walk to community centers and stores. They like the compactness of the area. Everyone feels it's a good area. Would like to see the county provide more, funding to buy other properties or make improvements that can help everybody. Also stated that, it's a lot of great qualities, but, it's in need of some updates. As far as the challenges, just one second. The challenges were tough to infill office and retail stores. Even though the place is compact, sometimes it does take you 20 minutes to drive to different places. It can be a tough draw to get retailers to come into the area. Again, the area needs a facelift. There was some back and forth about density of the area. It's not Crofton, so it doesn't have that density. But it would be great if some of that energy could come to Odenton. Other people felt that the density would be great, and it would be able to work itself out if that density did come. Other challenges were bicycle connections. Some areas don't connect. There's not a critical mass and that kind of exacerbates the need to drive to other places. We talked about like the giant shopping center and how it would be great if that redeveloped to have more streetscape and more buildings up against the street. But then we talked about fiscally that will be tough to do because it doesn't justify the rents to bring the type of stores that people want, and that the construction cost would also be difficult to build up a big time development for mixed use. Everyone agreed mixed use is the key, but we also there was discussion about appreciating the type of stores that want to come here, and that all the big time stores that do come just have not chose the area. There's several factors for that, but appreciating the stores that do want to come here, and that the county needs to be more flexible at times. And then as far as what would you like to see in Odenton in the next 10 years? Well, as far as a good model would be Columbia. Columbia is suburban, but also has great retail and great connections and walking paths. Laurel and Wall Chapel shopping centers were also examples as that were cited that could be good to model after. And lastly, what the group said is that in 10 years, they would like to see people in other communities say they would like to be Odenton. So that was my group. If there's anything that I missed, please, Eric, if you're still on the line, or Kelly and Stewart, please let me know if there's other points that you think the group wanted to emphasize.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks, Don. Brent, do you want to share what your group chatted about?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that we had some really great conversation, good discussion. I actually learned a lot about Odenton. There was just sort of a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge, contextual, historical, that our team brought to the table. So as far as what is liked about Odenton, there are a number of really interesting things that were brought up. Chief was, or one of them was the incoming park that's going to be adjacent to the library. So there was a quote which I'm probably going to paraphrase here, hopefully get it somewhat accurately, but it was, let me see if I can find it. How can you have a town center without a center of town? And I thought that was actually really, really pithy, and kind of did a good job, I think, of encapsulating a lot of the thoughts that went into our discussion. So with that in mind, hopefully this park can start to serve as some kind of centrality point, some kind of cohesive element that can, start to really develop the idea of a center of town, and a town center being one and the same. Something else was brought up was potential, that Odenton has a lot of potential. So it's really well positioned to be a hub for West County. It has a lot of great multimodal transportation potential. So for bikes, pedestrians, rail, cars, really everything. Of course, there is still some improvement that needs to take place there, but definitely the potential, and it's good to hear that potential is recognized. Another aspect of potential, of Odenton's potential, is a growing diversity of people. So new perspectives being brought to the table, new ideas, changing demographics. We also talked about accessibility. So coming from the east side, specifically from Annapolis, getting to Odenton is great. It's easy to do, and that's nice. And there's been some road widenings in the recent past, and that's also really helped out getting around. Now, moving on to the challenges. So Apparently there are 4 7-Elevens within quite a small radius, and not a whole lot to do unless you're a gas station enthusiast, or I guess a convenience store enthusiast. Something else that came up was traffic. Especially on rush hour, it is difficult to get around, and that has caused sort of a domino effect of other issues, including residents and people who frequently get around there having to reroute, go and take routes that are dangerous, which has also then caused issues with emergency services. So Wiley was telling us about an ambulance that had a head-on collision with another vehicle just because the traffic is so bad, and some of those alternative routes are just not really safe. There was also mention of the Mark parking lot, which we talked about briefly in your initial presentation, Mark, and how during normal times, so during non-COVID times at least, that parking lot tends to get very full, which leads to overflow. And some of that overflow parking can then end up in some of the retail parking lots, and some of the other areas, which can displace potential shoppers. It can displace people who, who live there, who work there, and that can be frustrating. So some improvements certainly need to happen over there. Let's see what else we have. All right, some other issues, some other challenges are just the sheer number of owners, property owners within Odenton. So having so many people who have a stake, it makes it difficult to sort of build consensus and to create action. And I thought there was actually an interesting conversation that went on there. And I'll mention at this juncture, Jonathan, if there's anything, if you want to put a fine point on what I'm saying here, feel free to jump in. You have my full permission, because this is a point that Jonathan Williams was expounding upon, and I thought it was quite interesting. But with that, there's also different levels of public ownership. So you have state-owned roads, and you also have county-owned roads. And that makes action difficult when you're working with those different levels of government. Signage is an issue too. When it comes to developing a sense of identity and community in Odenton, some kind of unified signage that sort of says, hey, you're in Odenton right now, or hey, if you want to get to the park, if you want to get to the library, if you want to get to the MARC station, wayfinding signage can also be really effective for building that sense of place. And that's something that there's currently a little bit of a lack of. The last thing I'll mention is biking pedestrian infrastructure is difficult and life-threatening, I believe. I might be paraphrasing on that one also. And then we talked a bit about the future of Odenton, so where we like to see it in 10 years. And, I think generally the idea is that there needs to be smart growth where it's contextually appropriate. We need to preserve, historical assets. We need to preserve other assets, environmental assets, and densify where it's appropriate, and conserve where it's appropriate to do that too, and just finding the balance of those two sometimes competing forces.
Okay, great. So Jason, if you don't mind sharing anything new to the conversation that you and your group chatted about.
Sure. So I had Gina, Greg, Kim, Brian, and Marilee, and we had a great conversation. A lot of what has been said already, I'm not going to rehash. So I'll just very, very briefly summarize just new points that I don't think I heard, what do you like about Odenton? And it was the centrality of it with respect to transportation, with respect to the roads, with respect to just Maryland in general. Odenton is in a great location. And so that can't be understated. For the challenges, a lot of the challenges are very similar, but I do want to highlight the the point, and a little bit more, extend a little more the point that was just made about the property ownership, but it's the mixed uses everywhere, but there's no cohesion. So I think to summarize in terms of a new point, it would be the vision. Like there is no clear vision for Odenton in terms of development, and the shape of Odenton doesn't really help with that, because it's very hard to tie Odenton together based upon the snail-shaped map of what the growth management area is and all the disparate areas that are in there. And then part of that is, however the master plan goes, actually an interesting point that got brought up was education. Educating the public and educating everybody about what Odenton is and what is in Odenton and how all of that is connected together is a critical aspect that's currently missing, and that people don't know what is in Odenton or how to get around Odenton. And that in some ways ties into what we'd like to see in the future. We actually had a really great discussion about towns that we would love to see Odenton look like, but none of them actually will work in Odenton just because of the way Odenton is shaped. And that's because Maryland 175 being such a major thoroughfare and kind of breaking Odenton apart, it makes it impossible to have an actual, like a town center like you would have in, say, New England or in other places down south, or in even other areas of Odenton or of Maryland, where you have an actual like town square where things are built around that square. Odenton just isn't shaped to make that effective. And I think that we could create a town square, but the compounding problem of all the property owners makes that challenging. So we like the idea of mom and pop style stores, not cookie cutters, and a focus on integrating the diverse areas of Odenton to make a more cohesive vision. Over.
All right, good stuff, Jason. Sandy. And you're on mute there.
There we go. You can hear me now. My group was composed of Jennifer and Dr. Powell and Kara and John and Ellen. And we found, much like the other groups, as far as what people liked about Odenton is the MARC station and the ability to get to different areas. They liked the diversity of the population. They liked that Odenton is centrally located between DC, Annapolis, and Baltimore. And one of the observations was the walkability around Piney Orchard. Piney Orchard was designed so people could walk and enjoy the outdoors. On challenges in Odenton, some of what we learned is that people are using surrounding areas for shopping, the lack of retail. So they're looking at Watchapel, they're looking at Arundel Mills. They observed the lack of parking at the MARC station, and that it's a high use station and there just isn't sufficient parking. Another observation for that area was the lack of retail, so that if you're there ahead of a departing train or you've come back, the ability to do some shopping right there. On the what would you like to see in Odenton in 10 years? The same thing, more sidewalks, more paths. A couple of people brought up a farmer's market. Obviously, they'd like to see a parking garage. They would like to see more retail and less medical. And some little niche type things like wine and beer emporium, coffee businesses, bakeries, places where people can go and hang out. One of the points brought up was a community center, which provides a central hub for organizations and groups to meet. An indoor pool, basketball courts, rock climbing, things of that nature. And the fourth question that was thrown out there is, why don't you ride the MARC? And the answers were, I had one individual that rode the MARC before COVID. Then we have a retiree, somebody who doesn't even live in Odenton, somebody who lives in Baltimore and works in Washington, so they just pass through. So a multitude of different answers there.
Okay, Great, Sandy. And I'll just finish up with our group. I included Andrew, Pat, Kathy, and Matthew. And a lot, what we talked about has already been covered. Popularity of the MARC train station, people, the Hideaway, give a plug to the Hideaway if you're looking for lunch after this session, and the Odenton Volunteer Fire Company. Wiley folks enjoy the community atmosphere that the food trucks bring, the fair, bingo, the different types of events that are provided at the Odenton Volunteer Fire Company. Challenges within Odenton, again, vacancy at the retail locations, heavy traffic along 175 and Maryland 32, the types of uses that we're seeing, like gas stations, self-storage, again, lack of places for families, the need for green space, parks, and then lastly, crowded schools, how to make sure that schools have the capacity and the amenities within those schools for all the students there. And then lastly, how would you like to see Odenton in 10 years? I think one thing our group touched on was the environmental resources. So how do we prevent stormwater runoff getting into the Little Patuxent River? So making sure that we clean up those rivers from the start with our requirements, but also being proactive and seeing what type of capital projects can be implemented to clean those up after the fact. Making Odenton a destination, I think that's clearly been a theme here, that it's the center of everything, but there's nothing here in the center. So how do we keep people in the Odenton Town Center? Taking a moment to stop what has already happened, seeing that it's mostly residential that has been built over the past X number of years, and making sure that future development then better reflects the vision that the community sees. They don't want to be a bedroom community for Fort Meade. The MTA encourages the goal of creating a TOD around the transit properties, and they're committed to working with the jurisdictions to make that a reality. Specifically also looking at the Nevermar site, making sure that does get developed into some type of mixed use development and additional retail that could help support the Flats 170 site that's already been built. But in the meantime, if that property, or I should just say in the meantime, if there's an opportunity to use the site for any other type of use temporarily, just so that folks driving by don't see the fence up. And that sort of goes along with one of the last ones here I'll talk about here is the beautification of streetscapes. So if there's an opportunity to plant trees in any type of median or vegetation, or just the general upkeep of our roads, and making sure that they're beautiful for passersby. And then the last couple, again, going along the environmental theme, making sure that there's a green canopy, and we implement green building design standards for new buildings. So anything else, Pat or Andrew, Matt or Kathy, that you guys would add? Okay.
I think you captured everything.
Okay. Great. So what I'm going to do is in our last 2 minutes here, I just want to share some of our next steps. And then I'll cut everybody free to go to the Hideaway for lunch. Okay, so our next steps, like I mentioned, I should have actually included another bullet here that we're having another meeting this evening at 7 o'clock. You can still register for that if you want to tune in and share, or just sit on the sidelines and listen. That's completely fine. We'll be having an online survey launching today, as well as the paper survey that I mentioned is available in the Odenton Library in the lobby. We'll be preparing a meeting summary and posting the recording to the website, and just give us a little bit of time to get the summary up. The recording can be posted a little bit sooner. So if you're interested, check back for that in the next week or so. Based on the conversations that we've had today and this evening, we're going to do a follow-up survey once we have an opportunity to sort of digest some of the information, create more of a concise summary from it, and like I said, try to drill down a little bit more on some of these discussions that we've had. We sort of kept it very general, I think, at this meeting, but we do want to get into some more specifics as we move through the process. The Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee meet the last Tuesday of every month. They're going to be discussing a lot of these next steps. They're going to be doing a debrief at the next meeting, start getting into visioning. So developing a vision statement for this Odenton Town Center master plan. The next virtual or in-person meeting to review the draft plan will be held in September. Like I mentioned, here's that timeline again. And again, that next time that we reconvene might be in September when we have a draft plan for the public to review. But in the meantime, please visit the website that we have there, aacounty.org/OTC. That's where you'll find the online survey, the meeting summary, the recording, and more information on this process, as well as information on how to sign up for the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee meetings. We also have a dedicated email address, otc@aacounty.org. Feel free to send any questions or comments you have, and we'll be responding to that. You can also just send us an email to that address. Let us know if you want to be on our distribution list so that when public meetings are announced or there are updates, you'll be in the know of that. We'll send you an email for that. So with that, I'll leave you. I think this is a good slide to end on, again, just so that anybody can grab that website and the email address. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we wrap up for today? And Jesse, if you might help me out here too, if anybody's raising their hand. No? Okay, so again, I really do appreciate everybody's time. And again, please stay tuned in the process. And again, it's this public engagement that really makes the plan a success. So really look forward to the public participation in the future, and please stay tuned. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.